staffing issues. And so, Martin, please.
Members of council, yeah, just letting people know that we are in the middle of a surge here in Western Montana. We are usually a few weeks behind the nation, and so from everything I've heard and read, I believe Omicron is the dominant strain here. A few, I guess, upsides to that is that it's not as severe, but it still is serious. It can cause very serious complications with the immune compromised, those being our elderly, our children. So definitely, be extra diligent out there. Unfortunately, I think the health departments are so overwhelmed with what's going on, the contact tracing and everything, that they just haven't been putting out numbers regularly. I believe Tuesday we were at 170 for Lake County. I may be off on those numbers. I'm just going off memory, but that's a stark increase from about a week or 10 days ago when we were at like 30 cases. Maybe it's 3 weeks now. So definitely it is here. It is running rampant. Kind of the people that I've talked to are saying it feels a lot like strep throat. It kind of sore throat and those type of things are more common than the loss of taste and smell. So that one, especially for Omicron, is something that you got to be a little extra aware of, because the symptoms aren't as severe, and it may just feel like a sore throat. Still take precautions. As the chairman said, we had housing shut down yesterday. Looks like prosecutor's office today. And so, be extra diligent out there. If you're sick, stay home. And I would hope that our supervisors here support that and are allowing our staff who are sick to work from home, or if they're exposed, to allow them, flexibility with their schedules or whatever it be. The other thing is that, we should be doing is staggering schedules, remote working when possible. We are still in the middle of a pandemic, and close quarters for offices aren't always great. One other thing that shouldn't really have to talk about, but I will. We had a stimulus payment come out, and thankfully I've never been affected by real closely by overdoses or things like that. But the people that have been talking a lot about getting Narcan available, if you can get it. I was going to research where you can. That's kind of a life-saving measure for people that may have an overdose. I have a friend who saved one of his family members' lives, and unfortunately, with fentanyl out there, it is very easy to overdose on things that are seemingly safe, but possibly enhanced with that. And unfortunately, because of our social media presence and our kind of spotlight out there, remembers when the payments are, and they come over here and they load up. And unfortunately, there will be increased drug activity, increased, alcohol, kind of illicit things. So I really hope that we are, as a community, as people, looking out for one another. Even the addicted are our family. And a lot of it is a lot of this, it's not necessarily always their fault. A lot of us grew up in dysfunction and things like that. Just living where we do is we have a lot of historical trauma. And so, please, let's be compassionate towards the people that need it now, and, look out for people. And I think COVID has taught me one thing, that we really have to do that as humans, and not let our political leanings or our personal beliefs affect us not doing what's safe for our communities and safe for our people. So I appreciate the time always. COVID is getting very, like everyone, it's getting to be a burnout thing. And with me, it is. And so that's why I try to tailor these updates into other things, other issues that we're facing, because we've been a little sidetracked the last few years with the pandemic. And, it's been proven that our mental health has suffered, our drug abuse have gone up. A lot of things have happened with COVID that maybe weren't out in the forefront, but, we're working on those. And, they're all our families. And as tribal members, we need to take care of our families. So thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Anita.
I just have a comment. I've been getting emails and texts from people thinking that maybe the tribe is thinking about closing down again until we get healthy. I'm hoping that we don't get to this point, and I'm pretty sure that tribal health will keep us updated and come in with their recommendations. But as of this point, we had not talked about it, but that was some of the questions that I was getting. I don't know if the other council members have gotten any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Len.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Martin, thank you for that report. Like I said, I've always appreciated your weekly updates on that. And yes, Anita, I've also been getting a lot of calls too from the membership wanting to know the status of that. So something we need to definitely discuss. But also, I also wanted to mention regarding our COVID policy, our COVID leave policy, I should say. I think that's something that we need to look at modifying, because we're finding ourselves in situations now where we're having employees, especially employees that have children in school, that are having to take time off work. And as well as I do, with this rampant surge that we currently have, many employees at this point in time are going to be very reluctant to donate any of their COVID leave, and they need to keep it for themselves, and that's understandable. But I think we need to look at modifying potentially and adding some more hours of leave for these employees so they can address these situations. So just wanted to mention that, because I do know a few of employees that have been in that situation, and we're having trouble obtaining the leave, and this is after they've used all their PTO. They're just tapped out of resources. So I just wanted to throw that out there, and hopefully we are able to find a solution.
Thank you, Len. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think one thing that council we can do very easily and very without it causing any harm to us is we all accrue 80 hours of COVID leave. One of the benefits that we have is we don't have to take leave. If we all donated our 80 hours to that pool, 80 times 10, do the math, that's quite a few hours for people. And I think that from what I understand is there's not a huge amount of people that end up, needing those hours. And so I think that 800 hours of leave would be a good start. Maybe we could work with our department heads and the people that we know have, a lot of leave or may not be affected, by giving up those 80 hours if need be. So I think that let's let the new policy kind of work and see where we're at in 6 months, if we need to adjust and add more, then, we can do that because it's a calendar year. And January 1st, it all started over. So everyone has the fresh 80 this calendar year. Even our contract employees, I believe they are, we work with departments on that because some of the contract employees, say like our language apprentices, weren't able to access that. So that's been fixed, but I think that we are, as leaders, we could do that. I think we did that last year before the turn of the year. So I'll be doing that as soon as we can, as soon as Rick gets back.
Thank you, Martin. I know I'd certainly do that. I always donate leave. I just, one other thing I want to make sure everybody knew about is the home test kits that are available. People can, every household can get 4 test kits. If you haven't submitted for that, please do. The other thing that's coming out, and the one thing that's more effective for this particular variant, is the N95 masks. So N95 masks are they're going to start providing those also, the federal government, for free. And those are very effective for preventing the spread of this particular variant that's mostly airborne. So I would encourage people, if you don't have any, seek them out. And that would be the preferred option for group settings if you have any in the future, if you can get a hold of them, or if there's more of those are in production. Len, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Martin there because, because council does not acquire PTO leave, I was unsure that we were even given the COVID leave. So, I mean, if that's the case, that's great, and I would be more than willing to donate mine. So.
Absolutely. Jennifer?
Thank you, Chairman McDonald. I agree with Len. I think we should look at modifying our COVID leave policy. I would see this as a more viable opportunity, or a more viable alternative than completely shutting down the tribes again, as expanding COVID leave. I know somebody who was exposed as a direct contact 3 times when the guidelines were different, and they missed 6 weeks of work without actually getting COVID. So they basically zeroed out all of their leave without getting sick, which they still might get sick. And the guidelines have changed. I know it's down to 5 days, which is what I heard from the nurse, because I recently had COVID, and thank goodness my symptoms were extremely mild because I'm vaccinated. But still 5 days, and that's because I only had to quarantine for 5 days because I was very mildly sick. But some people, even if they're vaccinated, they're definitely getting very sick still. So I would definitely be in favor of expanding that, because of especially people with kids. Two Eagle is the only school I know of that's requiring masks. The other schools are not, and I know families that are just getting wiped out because their kids are infecting them. So I would be very much in favor of it, looking at that, re-examining it as an alternative to completely shutting everything down, and just making more leeway for people who need to quarantine and do that.
Thank you. Jennifer, Martin?
So I put the test kit information on. I actually ordered myself 4 yesterday. It's really simple. It's a USPS fillable document. You put your name, address in, and click submit, and they're on their way. And then one thing that, while we got some time, I wanted to make sure that I forgot on Tuesday, but we got these awesome coffee mugs from Three Chiefs Cultural Center. They were gifted to us by the staff down there. They're very nice cups with the new logo on, and I just want to make sure that we acknowledge them. They were actually another place that had to shut down because of COVID. I believe they're still doing COVID curbside. So definitely support our local vendors, that a lot of our local artists sell their merchandise to them, so you can purchase it there. And then, yeah, definitely a good place to pick up presents if you need them.
Thank you, Martin. The one thing that should be noted for tribal families, and this is one of the discriminatory things about this, the test kits are great, and it's a super thing, but it's a limited of 4 for every address. And so when you have families that have multiple families living in the same address or something, that 4 test kit isn't enough. So there's actually a need for more for a lot of tribal households. That was the only thing I thought was a weak point of this test kit offering. Just so you know, we can actually probably bring up at the chairs meeting, talk about the COVID leave and how we could modify it. I think Jennifer's comments are fantastic because I hate shutdowns. And I think if we need to be more flexible, I appreciate department heads, program managers, supervisors that work diligently with the staff to have flexible schedules and work from home as much as possible. Every alternative needs to be sought out in a pandemic to keep, we have to still have business carry on. So how we can be creative to be safe and carry on government, that's certainly a solution that we would always strive for. So visiting the COVID leave policy would be a good thing to make it contemporary, whatever our current issues are. Jimmy.
Yeah, just wanted to comment on what Leonard and Jennifer both said. That we got families that have the parental duties for grandparents, their grandparents, and those kids that are sick and sent home from these schools and test positive, the two grandparents are going to have to take off work, take care of them. And however long that is, I mean, if it's down to 5 days or it continues on, whatever, they're going to be out of time. I mean, they're going to be missing work. I mean, you can't send them in because they're exposed already. So that's a real concern. I'd like to talk about that, how we can cover that and help them. Because it's gonna affect that whole family. And there's a variety, a lot of that going on. So we need to really be concerned about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing in the schools. Jennifer brought up another real critical point. I believe the only other school I know of in Western Montana that's just went back into a required mask policy might be Hellgate, one of the Missoula schools. But that, of course, is such a easy thing to do that I get disappointed in our public school systems and not requiring masks. And because that's probably the super spreader is the public school system right now at this point in time. So Anita?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, hit the wrong button. I was going to say it was Hellgate. And just to remind everybody here, about a month and a half, 2 months ago, we actually separated out different councilmen in their prospective districts and tried to visit with the school boards as to what their plans were. And very few of them were willing to go to the masking. Like you said, Two Eagle and of course CCS and our tribal schools and our own buildings, but they were very hesitant and they were waiting to see what the two larger schools, which was Polson and Ronan, were going to do. But they're almost waiting for the situation to happen before they start contacting people and quarantining. So I don't know if that's something we want to visit again or not, but we did try to visit with the different school boards. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Anita. Any other discussions on COVID? I certainly, during our chairs meeting, I'd love to have this discussion on Monday morning. Jennifer?
Yeah, I just know that right now, because of the surge in cases, it's actually really hard to get a test. And I had symptoms on Wednesday and got tested as soon as possible because even though I was so mildly sick, I almost thought it's just a cold, but I thought I can't take any chances. And thank goodness I did because it was positive, and I'm so glad I didn't infect anybody. So tribal health wasn't able to get me in for a test until Friday, and I got sick on Wednesday. So I went to the hospital and it took me 3 days to get my results back. And so, I just want to encourage everybody, even if you don't feel like you're that sick, or if you're just being a baby or being overly cautious, definitely get tested so you don't infect other people. Because for me, it was extremely mild, but for someone else, it might not be, and you just don't know. And I have no idea how I got it. I don't know where I picked it up, but my kids didn't get it. I did. So anyway, I just want to encourage people to be, not to feel like you're being a big baby and like, oh, my nose is running, I'm gonna go get tested. You should definitely get tested, because that's pretty much all I had. And that the tests are taking, mine took 3 days. So, in terms of looking at our COVID leave policy, if you believe that you're sick or you've been exposed, it's gonna take at least 3 days of quarantine before you even know whether or not you actually have it.
Jimmy?
Yeah, I was just thinking about what Anita said about visiting with the school boards. I wonder if it would be more effective if we put someone together with the council rep and somebody from maybe Tribal Health or something to go to the school boards and, as I know, some of the people in Harley are not very receptive to that. And I think if we had people that talk about it and then try to convince them to do something, because that's where it's coming from, is the schools. It's coming from there and the sports events. So I think they need to be talked to, made aware of it. I mean, more so, I know they're aware of it, but they need to be, somebody to talk to them about it, because something needs to happen there. It's gonna continue.
Ellie?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And thank you for the suggestion, Jimmy. I would just let council know that we did attempt to do that. I believe council members attended Polson, Ronan, St. Ignatius, Harley, Charlo. I don't know if Anita made it to Dixon,
Hot Springs.
Hot Springs, but it was difficult to really try to have an engaging conversation. You're limited to like 2 minutes of speaking time. And that's open to all community members who are there. So it's not really an opportunity to engage in meaningful conversation to try to convince them. I don't know that I feel like any of the ones I attended were effective in any way, shape, or form. They all have their own teams, I guess, looking at the issue and making the determination for what they feel works best within their school system. So we did try it. I don't know that I would recommend.
Yeah, just interesting that two Eagles able to do it. I mean, they're doing it. I mean, it just seems like with some of these other schools should take note from that, because, that's gotta be, even just in your mind, it's more effective. So I would really like to see it happen in the schools, but I don't know if we can ever get it there.
Ellie?
We also, when we went in there, we had an opportunity to assist with PPE and kind of really think outside of the box if they would be willing to participate with us and trying to make kind of big statements, and it just didn't seem to be welcomed in that regard.
Thank you. Other discussion points? With that, I might take a short recess, and then we can do a couple updates from our meetings yesterday. Thank you. We'll go into recess. Go back into session. Our break's over. What I'd like to do is first talk a little bit about our meeting with one of the funeral directors and how we've been trying to figure out a better way to provide a different or better service to our membership for the funeral benefit that we have for each tribal member utilized. So myself and Carol and Jennifer and Mike met with Foster Funeral Home and had some discussions about ways to improve our service. And it was good to have a meeting with the operator of the funeral home because they do so much business and so much of a service to our membership that it's easy to identify being right there in that situation, ways that we can improve. So it was a good discussion that we had with Ralph, and it was kind of came to a couple different conclusions that we would, look at recommending to the governing body here, and it basically comes to separating out the actual wake and celebration of life costs in almost a different account from the burial costs. And so it's doing that and separating it out in that way provides a real fair opportunity for the entire membership, the living folks of a deceased tribal member, to be able to access it and utilize it in a very well, appropriate way. So, and then providing a separate fund that would deal with the wake or celebration of life that would be different. So even separating that out and maybe increasing the amount for the wake costs seemed to be a conclusion that we had from our meeting, but I'll let Jennifer and Mike talk a little bit about it too, and their observation of our meeting.
Okay, thank you, Chairman McDonald. Yeah, I thought yesterday's meeting was very productive and extremely informative, and really generous of Ralph to do that, to host that for us, because he gave us some really good information about how much a funeral actually costs. And so one of the ideas that we talked about that I would support is, having a set amount that's for the burial expenses only, and that families would get up to a certain amount for burial, and then whatever they didn't use would go back into the tribes to eliminate the refund. And also to really emphasize that the burial benefits are to assist with the burial, and that burial expenses might go over. And I don't think it was ever intended to cover everything if a family wants a giant service or something like that, but it's to assist families. And some families could make it work under, with that amount. And then to have a separate amount for the wake expenses, and a family would have up to a certain amount of money to use for wake expenses, and also if they wanted to have family fly home or for mileage or anything like that, that would be taken out of that same pot of money. And again, not every family would use the full amount. And then if it wasn't used, it would just go back into the tribes. It wouldn't go, there would be no refund back to individuals. So I thought that was a good idea. And then separating it out that way, there would also be an increase in that amount for wakes and other expenses that people have. I just thought that made sense.
The other thing that we talked about is that wake expense fund could be used on the burial expenses too, if they chose to do that. The other thing that I didn't know about that was brought to our attention during the meeting was for a local service like that and accessing the burial benefit, we require a death certificate before payment can be made. And I could see that for faraway services, something that's not local or regional. But for a service that, we may be even attending that's local, that sometimes, given the coroner or medical considerations, it's difficult to get a death certificate in a timely manner. And so the bill can be outstanding for quite some time for the funeral business to recoup or get paid for that service. So one of the things that we could look at is for those local services that could be expedited, that we don't require the death certificate, because we all know, of course, that the person died. And that would then help with the bottom line of the operation of the business, and help make it more fluid and financially stable, and not have that debt accrual for services that they're providing, that they're not fronting the cost. I didn't know that, and so that's something we could work with. Council wants to entertain that with our executive team, and see if we can figure that out, make a change there maybe.
So yesterday's discussion, and I apologize for not making the meeting, but was there an estimated average amount that it was suggested that we increase this by, increase our burial allowance? Or is that something that we need to have a discussion with our financial people?
What we did find out, that basically, other than Ralph's business, that there's basically a monopoly going on. So the predicament is, if you increased what we would do for the burial benefits, it would be consumed immediately. The costs are range anywhere from $3,500 to $9,000. That's what I believe I recall at the meeting, is what he said. So, it's really a matter of that independent service funeral home, and how they work with the client, and what the wishes are of the family. There's quite a bit of variance there. But if you doubled it, they would consume it. That was the feeling that I got. It would just automatically be consumed. It's just, it looked to me like, the other thing is that some folks, when they do go over the amount that we have provided, or they're working on it, that sometimes there's a debt outstanding, and the funeral business has a hard time collecting that debt. And so it's kind of if they knew that there was an absolute guarantee for a certain amount that's available, that would make their bottom line and easier, and it would help bring down the overall costs because of that guarantee. So if anything, it could be a guaranteed like $4,000 and have $1,500 in the wake expenses, increase it by 500. We had a lot of different discussions about what it might be. And what we can afford. The other thing that we talked about is our population age, and what our demographics are. How do you forecast something like that? And so you could say right now we're about at the peak, unless something changes with enrollment. We're about at baby boomers in our population are kind of the same way as the general American population. So that slug of people in their 60s and above is a big bulk, and we're about at the peak of that death rate. And so you would forecast a decreasing benefit amount that would be needed in the future as you go forward, because of our population decline. I think that's what we briefly talked about in that. I don't know that specifically. I just tend to agree with it. The thing that was on the upside was the amount of services for other Indians from other tribes here, the increase for spouse and descendants that might be here, but there's basically the amount of services provided by the local funeral homes is you know, it's up, I think if I did the math, it'd be up 300% from what it was just 30 years ago, just because of the number of people that are moving here on a population. So there's a lot of business, but our business may actually be declining over time, that this benefit would be utilized for. Ellie.
Moving forward, then does there need to be a smaller committee established to kind of dive into it deeper to bring something forward to the rest of council? Is Ralph working on something? Is our executive team going to work on it? How do we move forward in determining what amounts we're going to approve in each category?
That's a good question, Ellie. And so I think it was a stepwise fashion. One of our first steps was meeting with Ralph to have inside information in the business and the services as he sees it, because he's been the principal service provider, I believe. So that step's been taken. Now, you know, an executive team or a subcommittee of the council to work with what we can look at financially to afford for a change would be appropriate. And then the other issue of when it's paid out, you know, the death certificate would be a good one to bring forward and clear that one up. Itemizing and separating out into two accounts, like we discussed, would be at least in the appearance of, yeah, and work with our executive team and figure out what we can for a budget. If we do have an increase, even if we didn't have an increase, having that separation appear to be maybe a benefit to what we're doing. Martin.
Sure. Are we gonna engage the other mortuaries at all? I know that Lakes handles the majority of the funerals up north. To us, but I feel like we should probably do our due diligence and at least try to reach out to them and see if they wanted to have the same opportunity to express their concerns. Thank you.
That's a great point. And that was actually one of the trends that Ralph identified was the population shift moving up here and so many more services up at this end. So Lake Funeral Home or Schreider's. The other thing that we identified as can be a limiting factor is just the number of cemeteries and the cemeteries that we own. And, you know, that cost can be dealing with the different cemetery boards and those costs. So, you know, maximizing that opportunity to use our own tribal cemeteries can help bring down the cost for any individual family that's engaged in the loss of a loved one. So there are some other discussion points, and I can't disagree with you at all. Meeting with the executives of the other funeral home, which would be representative of all of them because they own them all, would maybe doing our due diligence.
Is that there is funeral assistance available for COVID related deaths through FEMA. And that's something that I really didn't know about. So people who have deaths that they incur funeral expenses that are associated or caused by COVID-19 can be compensated, it sounds like, up to $9,000.
Yeah, and those, you know, military benefits and other, it's a matter of time. So it's seeking reimbursement is really what you have to do. So it's, you have to pay and then you seek reimbursement for it. So that can be a difficult thing if you don't have the money to upfront it and knowing that it could get reimbursed. And so some families just don't have that. And so that could be a limiting factor that Ralph also mentioned along with that particular discussion point.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Anita.
I'm wondering if somebody, we can have the executive team look at that to assist people in what they have to do after take and seek reimbursement. Because a lot of people ain't gonna know what direction to go and they're gonna need somebody to kind of step them through it. I wonder if anybody's even tried to seek reimbursement through FEMA. Enrollment might know.
That's a good question. I don't recall if Ralph said anybody was successful doing it. Mike, do you remember?
It sounded like he had helped a handful of people make that request. And he definitely was making sure everybody was aware that was coming through his services.
Well, certainly would recommend that we carry forward and make the improvements. And the most important thing is that we're treating everybody equal. And everybody has equal opportunity to access this benefit. It's been a long time, as we mentioned before, since it's been revisited and modified. And so if there's improvements that we can make, then hopefully our subcommittee and the executive team can bring forward an action for us to consider. I would ask anybody that want to volunteer to help shepherd this through and meet with Rick and Greg and others in the executive team, and then try to meet with the Lake Funeral Home director or another representative. Volunteer. Might be. Anybody else? Jennifer?
I would be willing to assist, but I don't want to take any kind of lead just because I feel like I have a conflict of interest with my daughter being an employee there.
I think, any help identifying things would be appreciated, as long as we recognize the potential conflict of interest. That's the important thing. So thank you. So Ellie and Mike and Jennifer, I think Carol's not here, but she was kind of center to it. So we would probably leave it option for Carol to be part of this subcommittee to study this. Is it the consensus of council to move forward with it? The next update we have, I think we probably need to move into executive session. So we'll try to do that and give a brief update on our gaming.